Hi everyone, it's Natalie here. Beautiful Saturday morning, and I just had an experience. I just had an interesting experience this morning when I was out walking my dog. Actually, two dogs. I'm sure there will be another video with her in it, but I've got my mom and dad's little Shih Tzu, Susu, who I've nicknamed long ago, nicknamed Squiggle. And I had them out and I was walking them this morning, and in a moment when I was just distracted and I hadn't had coffee yet, I wasn't really fully paying attention. My dog, Noah, who is presently, I might be able to get quick, there he is. He's having his morning nap there in front of the altar. He thinks, well, anytime I get up and leave or move away from it, he takes my spot. So that's nothing new. He's always done that. We were out this morning and we passed like a really low tree, a small tree, kind of shrub-sized tree that was kind of sitting on the street, in an easement area between the sidewalk and the street. And some of the branches were kind of low, and he stuck his face in there, and I'm used to seeing him do things like that a lot. There's, it's the city. People drop food. They drop all kinds of interesting things that are there that he wants to smell. Sometimes, he seems to have an affinity, sorry, I know this is gross, but this is what dogs do. He has an affinity for, rabbit turds, and you just never know with a dog, large dog like that. So he was sniffing around this bush, and before I knew it, he came out with a baby bird, like a small bird, fledgling probably, and he had killed it. He'd broken its neck, and it wasn't dead yet. So he dropped it on the ground and was incredibly excited about having captured it, and it was awful. It was really awful. The bird was trying, opening its beak, trying to get air. And all I could think was just stay with it. Stay. Don't look away. Don't look away. Stay. Watch. Breathe. Take it in. Offer that bird as much gentleness as you can find, and just stay. Don't look away. And so as that went on, I got closer and closer to the bird, and closer to the bird, and watched it go. And it was very clear, just in an instant, I kept thinking, oh, I hope he's not suffering. I hope it's not suffering. I hope it's not suffering. And eventually it was gone, and it was very fast. It was very quick. So this is the best way we can begin. I knew, and as soon as it happened, this is the best way to begin talking about the Mariel deck. True Seven of Cups moment. Because there's my dog. He's beautiful. He looks just like this, with just a little bit more white around the muzzle. He looks just like this. And, just as this dog, it was the Seven of Cups in the Mariel deck. So to understand this black dog, right? So I can imagine, probably a lot of people would think, okay, whoa, that's how can you even love your dog? How are you letting him, I can imagine a lot of different thoughts coming up, actually, as I say that. Around, what's going on here? Why would all of that? In order to talk about this properly, and in order to talk about the Mariel Tarot, we have to talk about septenaries, and we have to talk specifically about the Chariot. So the way that Marie White has set up her deck is through septenaries. And all tarot is, of course, set up through septenaries, because if you take the Fool out and you don't count the Fool as one of the 78 cards and instead you think of them as 77, you have 11 sevens, or 11 sets of sevens, which are then placed within the structure of the 3 septenaries of the major arcana and the duality of septenaries in the minor arcana. So I will address the 11 aspect and the 2 aspect and the duality aspect in another video. But today I will really I want to talk about this duality and specifically relate it to the septenaries and specifically, to the Chariot and the sevens in her deck. So in the description, here we go. In our description of the Seven of Cups, she says very specifically, William Blake, in his Marriage of Heaven and Hell, describes the duality of man being reason and energy. And this dark horse, though wild and ill-bred, is the source of our passion and energy, even as the white horse is civilized. One without the other leaves an ill-balanced chariot without energy, passion, and spirit, or without control, morality, and goodness. So why is that important? And I think that's a really important question. So I think the tarot is best understood, all tarot is best understood through life and through life experience and through understanding and connecting things directly to life. Some of that's my bias as a theater practitioner and artist. Some of that is, I think some of that is actually just the nature of this particular tool as well. I had that experience this morning with my dog, beloved dog, who looks just like this. It would be very easy for me to project this onto him, right? Metaphorically. But the truth of the nature of this dog is that he's both and. He looks like this dog. He contains both of these dogs. And so do we, right? So do we. So, sorry, I just had an alert from Google. Well timed there. So why does that, why does that matter, right? Why am I talking about that so specifically? I was looking for an oracle deck to maybe companion with, something that would go really, really well with the Mariel that isn't the soul cards, right? I know that Kelly from Truth and Story related the soul cards back to the Mariel. I can totally see that. I absolutely get why they would fit well. And it's not quite what I'm looking for. I'm thinking it might be something closer to like the Weaver's Oracle, something of that ilk that will work best. I don't have the Weaver's Oracle yet. I'm just kind of looking at options here before I pull out the old credit card. And as I was looking for that, I did a Google search, right? And I was looking for more information about the Mariel Tarot and looking for more information about, any observations, things I could learn from other people. And I came across a blog written by someone who basically deemed it a really dangerous deck, and talked on and on about a really unhelpful or frightening experience that they'd had with working with the Mariel Tarot, and then talked as well about having kind of a dark experience about working with the Thoth deck. And this person, this blogger, had gone to some kind of party or conference. It sounded more like a party or gathering of tarot practitioners, where they did an exchange of decks. You know, kind of like a white elephant. Everybody wraps up a deck and puts it in. Puts it in, and they pass gifts around or draw numbers or whatever, and somebody gets the deck. Anyway, the blogger had identified a woman in the party that they found really disturbing and really uncomfortable to be around. The person seemed, as this blogger described them, to be very needy, kind of full of dark energy, etc. And then when it came time to draw decks, the blogger made the comment that they weren't surprised that the deck had ended up, that the Thoth deck had ended up with this person, with this woman. And the entire blog post, without reading it, without exposing who it was, because I don't think that's necessary, it's not anyone I'd ever heard of anyway. So not that means anything, but just that, like, it's not someone who's really prominent in the community that everybody knows or anything like that. But the blogger clearly felt a great deal of pity for this woman and felt a great deal of discomfort in her presence. And I really had the sense that I think it was a he, actually. I'll be honest. I think it was a male blogger. It was hard to tell. It seemed like it was more like a female blogger. I think actually it was a male blogger. So I'll just be honest. It was a he. He mentions that he was uncomfortable, that he, it sounded, his language that he used was really pitying of her. And it also sounded to me like he was kind of judging her. He was judging her. He was judging someone who would use a Thoth deck. He was judging anyone who would use a Mariel deck. And in fact, he was so disturbed and distracted and upset by the experience he'd had with the Thoth. He was like second guessing whether he should have even given that Thoth deck to this woman or not. And it was so distressing and upsetting to him that he destroyed his Mariel deck when he got home. Just destroyed it. And he mentions, like, maybe it wasn't right away, but he mentions, like, having had an experience where he pulled the deck out and was going to start to work with it. And as he did that, hit a light bulb, in his special room that we all really kind of have. Obviously, I'm in my special room, like blue, the light bulb blue. Well, if any of you have ever seen my video where I talk about death and the death card, right in the middle of it, I had a witch ball drop, from one of my windows. Things like that happen. Things like that just happen. That probably would have happened whether I was reading with this deck or not. What I found interesting was my interpretation of an experience like that and his interpretation of an experience like that were very different. So this is what leads me to talk about specifically the tie-in between these two cards and the Chariot and what's known as spiritual bypassing. So I don't know if anybody has actually ever heard of spiritual bypassing. What we could say essentially, a very simplistic definition of it would be to essentially choose one over the other, right? To say, okay, my dark horse doesn't exist. I live in the light. I live only in the light. I choose the light. The dark is bad. People who are dark are bad. People who are dark are suffering. Therefore, they should probably just be pitied, but I don't want to be around them. They're too difficult. They have a lot of, they zap you of energy. It's hard to be with. It takes me out of this place and drops me into this place, and I don't have tools to manage this place. I prefer this place because it's more comfortable, because it reflects me back to the world in a way that is really helpful, that's really comfortable, that makes people think I'm good, that makes me believe that I'm good, that makes me then reject this part of my experience, my personality, who I am, what I stand for, all of it. And this is a very, very thin line to walk. And it's not sustainable. Because then what happens? Inevitably, this dog becomes very hungry. We all have this dog, metaphorically. Every one of us. It is the darker aspects of who we are. It is, and it does represent a choice. So those of us used to seeing this represented as literal cups with lots of different things popping out of them, right? That too is an aspect of our darker nature, right? Not knowing which way to go, feeling pulled in multiple directions. It's often the result of not spending any time nurturing and loving and taking care of this dog. And without it, we can't drive our chariot any further. So many people have a spiritual journey that starts with the Fool and starts with the Magician and moves forward, but really never moves past the Lovers. Kind of gets stuck there. It might get close to the Chariot, but the Chariot doesn't move anywhere because you can't drive the Chariot without all of the horses or the dogs needed to drive the sled. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so we end up, instead of experiencing deep compassion, instead of experiencing deep realization, instead of experiencing something really powerful, we stay in a place that's comfortable because this seems scary. And to be completely fair, right? Because I will totally admit being stuck here for years of my life, right? Very, very long time. We don't have tools for working with this. But if we don't stop judging it and demonizing it and viewing any amount of darkness or lower self or difficulty as bad, we don't have any chance of ever being able to manage these things ourselves or of even developing those tools. Because the judgment will leave us so filled with fear that it will keep us conforming, and it will prevent us from the ability to move on and move forward in that spiritual journey, which is not going to be comfortable. And, I think that's probably too why this particular blogger found this deck uncomfortable, because it is not a comfortable deck. It doesn't describe a spiritual experience that's comfortable, and it's not going to validate someone who is afraid, and judges or has built up so much of a sense of identity, let's say, around being this, right? Being this dog or this white horse, that they cannot possibly find the fault, right, in themselves, or find that darkness is going to elude them. Essentially, it's going to elude them for a long time. So I find it interesting to come back to the way that she structured the deck. Within each suit, let me go back. Within each number, right? So within each number of the minors, she then correlates it back to a major, or perhaps more than one major. Depends on the card, depends on the element within that suit. But when she looks at the sevens, and I'm just flipping around here in my book because it's so brilliant, she talks about all of the sevens in the deck as being the way that we work with our chariot, the way that we drive that chariot forward and the way that we move it, right? The way that we harness it and continue through our journey, right? As deeply spiritual beings with the tools that we need then to navigate the abyss, because that second septenary, it's a Lulu. It's a doozy. It'll knock you right off your ass, right? So she gives us our list of tools and the ways that we need to work, move forward. So of course, we start here. We start with recognizing the higher self because we need to. We build a raft. Without building the raft of the higher self, we can't possibly move forward because we need this raft in order to get to the darkness. Because after we build the raft out of our 7 wands, right, that will keep us afloat as we delve into the darkness of the cups under the water. These are my analogies, actually, not hers, just to be clear. Before we can even do that, we then move to this card, right? So the raven and the sun, right? The raven steals this jewel originally in the story, eventually realizes its mistake, and returns that jewel to the sun. In so doing, it discovers that it has this remarkable higher purpose in life. Beautiful, amazing, inspiring higher purpose in life, right? Many of us get to this point in our journey with the chariot. We recognize, oh, wow, something went wrong. I have responsibility in that, and that gives me higher purpose. But if we feel too much shame around that experience, we're never going to be able to actually do it. And here's why. The belief that we have in ourself and in our purpose means that we also have to accept responsibility for our actions and then fully return the jewel from whence we stole it, metaphorically. In doing that, to return the jewel and receive the actual treasure of that experience that gives us our higher purpose, we have to recognize our responsibility, and we have to feel enough, just enough, true guilt, true shame, that it motivates us to dig deeper. In other words, that encounter with the light that's so bright is naturally going to have a knock-on effect. It will ricochet us backward and down. And without that deep dive down, we can't possibly reemerge. All right? So the raven comes back, recognizes its faults, and says, oh no, what does that mean about what I am, who I am, how I am? And it begins, because it's got the raft. It's got the raft of the higher self. It then also, and the purpose, the belief in the purpose, it then can come back and work with this darkness and this difficulty in the soul. It can see the greatest depths, the worst kind of depravity, the ways in which, you might watch a documentary about a serial killer and go, wow, that guy started off like a normal person. And the wounds and the difficulties that he encountered in his life are, in large part, what contributed to becoming a serial killer in the first place. I see that I have some of those tendencies in me. What do I do with that? What do I do with that? Well, that is also why you need your other friend. You need these 2 dogs to work together to reconcile what you find when you dive deep. I mention that as an example because I had that experience. What's the difference between me and someone who ends up in prison? And the answer, circumstances, choices, people who come along at the right moment, at the right time. It's tough. Life is tough. But it stopped a lot of the judgment that I might have had about anyone experiencing something difficult. I can tell you that. It was big abyss work. On a much more simple level, let's say that this is about the blogger that I just mentioned. All right, you're seeing this depth and this darkness in this person who then ends up with the Thoth deck. What about that person do you share? What qualities does that person have that you share that might be just like you? And I'll tell you, the pity and the judgment are what stops us from actually being able to look at it and view it through the lens of compassion. Pity is not the same thing as compassion. Pity is the near enemy of compassion. Real compassion can look it directly in the eye, see it for what it is, right? Held by all of this, and actually held by this experience as well, and say, look at that. And this sort of dark light is in between. She does this on purpose. And say, wow, I can hold that in a space of compassion because I've been there. And I found a way to hold myself in a space of compassion and stop judging myself for having those experiences that did not fit with this and my image of myself as being only this. Only love and light, only from the light, of the light, etc. Right? This is the way we bifurcate not just reality, not just society, not just political parties, not just, it's how we bifurcate ourselves, our entire being, all of it. And it's how we stop ourselves from being whole. Okay? Now, supposing we go through that aspect of the journey, okay, with that dog, knowing that we've got the white dog and the raven, right? And this gorgeous albino snake. And the jewel. What it leaves us with, and this is the order that these are in her book, it leaves us with the 7 of discs, where the sun rises up over the horizon and stops the sense of duality. It holds space between the two mountains for yes and. These are all here. They are all true, right? It sheds light on the dark. It draws in all of the possibility, all of the energies, and it unites everything in one place so that that chariot can move forward to the next place in the journey. Deep dive. Deep dive. So, we'll look at more of how she uses all of these different concepts, and I'll continue to illustrate them as best I can with reality as we move forward. All right, thank you so much for watching, everyone. See you soon.